Leading up to Wednesday's announcement, the European Union has said it is prepared to retaliate against President Trump's reciprocal tariffs.
President Trump's announcement of universal tariffs on the whole world, including the European Union, is a major blow.
And then they are going to come back. And we heard the president of the European Commission speaking this week in the language that President Trump understands. She says, look, the EU has a lot of cards. It is the world's single biggest market. It has an incredibly integrated economic relationship with the United States. And not just does it have the ability to impose tariffs, but European regulators can really turn the screws on American companies around the world.
President Donald Trump has just escalated his massive global trade war, announcing tariffs across all countries in the world, with rates going as high as 60% for some countries. The European Union has not been exempted and is dealing with massive tariffs on all their exports to the United States. Now, the EU has just announced its countermeasures, especially what it calls its big bazooka against the U.S. Is Trump going to step up the war in response? Like and subscribe to our channel for more updates on Trump's crazy trade war. Trump Liberation Day tariffs announced.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. Going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy.
President Donald Trump just declared a U.S. economic emergency, taking his global trade war to the next level. He has announced at least 10% tariffs across all countries, and there are rates of 60% for countries or trading blocs that have a high trade deficit with the U.S. China has been hit the hardest as the second top exporter to the U.S. behind Mexico. They are facing tariffs of 54% and have now vowed to hit back. Next are Canada and the European Union, also top trade partners of the U.S., which are preparing countermeasures. Meanwhile, it caused the after-hours U.S. stock markets to fall sharply, as well as the Asian and European markets after the tariff announcement. Now, the European Union is facing 20% tariffs on all their exports to the United States, as well as 10% levies on goods originating from the UK.
So there are two pillars to the new White House policy on tariffs. There's a universal 10% tariff, which kicks in on April 5th.
At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart. And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating.
Which would appear to apply to everybody globally, with two very specific exceptions, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And then there's a whole list of country-specific tariffs, which kick in on April 9th.
China, first row. European Union, Vietnam, Taiwan, and Japan. India, look at Switzerland, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, oh, look at Cambodia. United Kingdom, 10%. South Africa, Brazil, Bangladesh, Pakistan.
Trump's Liberation Day tariffs on April 3rd come after many other tariffs that he has imposed, like the 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports from around the world, including the European Union. He also imposed 10% tariffs on all imports from China and 25% on imports from Mexico and Canada. Trump's actions have already attracted a lot of concern and outrage from countries around the world. Now, his latest move with Liberation Day has caused the EU to hit back, as they have a well-thought-out plan that could cause the U.S. economy to be crippled. Europe calls Trump tariffs illegal.
President Trump's announcement of the tariffs hit countries worldwide hard. Europe, which sells everything from cognac to cars in the United States, had been bracing for the fallout, and President Trump certainly didn't disappoint. In his address, he put the European Union in the worst category of America's trade partners and hit the bloc with a 20% tariff on all imports. He also said it was pathetic.
Once Trump announced his global tariffs, including the 20% levy on all EU goods, the European Union responded instantly, slamming his tariffs as illegal. According to the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, the EU is feeling let down by the US, which has been its oldest ally, and the bloc is preparing a unified response. EU leaders are preparing to retaliate against Trump, especially since his tariffs could lead to a negative ripple effect for Trump's economy. President von der Leyen called the move a major blow against the EU's economy that would lead to higher bills and rising inflation.
This is why, from the outset, we have always been ready to negotiate with the United States to remove the remaining barriers to transatlantic trade. At the same time, we are prepared to respond. We are already finalizing the first package of countermeasures in response to tariffs on steel. And we're now preparing for further countermeasures to protect our interests and our businesses.
The EU had been bracing themselves for Trump's economic smackdown and had already announced that they would impose retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. by mid-April. Now that Trump has finally announced its tariffs, the EU has said that they would have to hit back against these new sets of levies too. This means that the EU is going to announce countermeasures against Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs, and also another set of measures against the new 20% levy. The EU has also said that it is open to negotiations, since the two economies have been intertwined for a long time. But after Trump's announcement, it doesn't seem like the U.S. is open to these negotiations. European Union countries respond to Trump.
Europe has everything it needs to make it through the storm. We are in this together. If you take on one of us, you take on all of us. So we will stand together and stand up for each other. Our unity is our strength. Europe has the largest single market in the world, 450 million consumers. That is our safe harbor in tumultuous times. And Europe will stand at the side of those directly impacted.
The European Union has announced that it would ratify free trade agreements with the South American Mercosur bloc and also with Mexico. The EU is also negotiating with India and other countries, so it's clear that they are looking for alternative trading partners to the U.S. Meanwhile, other EU countries have announced their response to Trump's tariffs, criticizing his move. The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, which has been one of Trump's top allies in Europe, had said that they are trying to work out an agreement with the U.S. to avert a trade war that would weaken the West. Also, the Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin had said that the tariffs are bad for the world economy and would harm transatlantic relations. He also added that he doesn't see the justification for Trump's tariffs since the EU and the U.S. trade billions worth of goods and services daily. But disrupting this relationship does not benefit anyone. As for Sweden, the Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson also argued that Trump's tariffs are going against the practice of free trade and competition. But now, Trump's decision is limiting the trade between the two blocs. Finland's Prime Minister called the tariffs concerning. He added that there is no winner in a trade war, as all businesses and economies would suffer. Finland is prepared to join the EU in its response against Trump. The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk asked the EU to prepare reciprocal tariffs against the U.S. As for Denmark's foreign minister, he stated that everyone is going to lose in this trade war with the U.S. and Europe. He also criticized Trump's talk about seizing control of Greenland. Many other European Union members have mentioned their criticisms against Trump, saying similar statements and adding that they would join the EU in a retaliatory tariff response against the U.S. But with Trump's behavior, he might just escalate the trade war after the EU announces its retaliatory tariffs.
He said also that the EU should suspend its investments in the United States as they work things out.
The French President Emmanuel Macron is going another mile, calling Trump's decision brutal and unfounded. He has also suggested that they would suspend all French investment in the U.S. until the tariffs were clarified. This would affect many businesses in the U.S., especially in the tech sector, where the United States has benefited enormously from Europe. Non-EU members responds to Trump tariffs.
Here in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer took a different tone, more measured. He pointed out that a trade war was in no one's interest and that he would take a cool, pragmatic approach. But actually, he's hoping to have bilateral talks with President Trump a little further down the road and actually get a carve-out, a little bit of a pardon for the United Kingdom.
Although Trump announced a collective 20% tariff on the EU, other European countries that are not part of the bloc have also been affected with different tariffs. Trump has imposed 15% tariffs on Norway, and their trade minister has announced that this would have a critical impact on the country economy. Norway also sends a lot of exports to the EU, so they would be more affected. Trump actually slapped a 31% tariff on all goods from Switzerland, which would be damaging to its economy. Switzerland has called for respect for international and free trade and wants to determine its next steps against the U.S. The UK is known for staying on the fence during Trump's trade war. It has refused to stand against the U.S., especially since retaliatory tariffs from the UK might not have such a major impact on the U.S. But now the UK has been hit with a 10% tariff, along with Australia, Brazil, Singapore, and other countries. The UK still wants to sign a deal with the US to reduce its tariffs, although its business secretary has warned, "We have a range of tools at our disposal and we will not hesitate to act." He also added that no one wants a trade war, and while the UK wants to secure a deal, if nothing works, they would have to act back and defend their interests. EU prepares countermeasures and negotiations.
The tariffs will also hurt consumers around the world. It will be felt immediately. Millions of citizens will face higher grocery bills, medication will cost more, as well as transportation. Inflation will go up, and this is hurting in particular the most vulnerable citizens. All businesses, big and small, will suffer from day one, from greater uncertainty to the disruption of supply chains, to burdensome bureaucracy. The costs of doing business with the United States will drastically increase. And what is more, there seems to be no order in the disorder.
The EU has announced that it would have a united response against the US, and now everyone's watching to see the retaliatory tariffs it would place in response to Trump. The European Union already postponed its initial round of counter tariffs until mid-April. Although they have stated that they would be open to dialogue and negotiation, they have also made it clear that if there's no solution, it will retaliate. There's no doubt that the EU wants to negotiate with the US to avoid mutual economic harm between the two countries. That's especially since Trump had been increasing its tariff threats against the UK, even threatening to place heavy tariffs on all their alcohol products. Because of these, EU member states have been trying to de-escalate the situation as they fear how it would impact their economies. But with Trump's latest move to impose 20% tariffs on all EU states, these members are now supporting countermeasures. The EU has planned to reinstate previously suspended tariffs on US goods and apply even higher counter tariffs on diverse US products. After Trump announced tariffs on steel and aluminum, the EU already said it was preparing retaliatory tariffs up to 26 billion euros of US goods such as bourbon, Harley-Davidson motorbikes, and many farm produce and industrial goods. These are going to be announced by mid-April. European Union's anti-coercion instrument.
Here we are not talking about classical commercial conflicts. Here we are talking on a situation where the third country tries to use restrictions of trade and investment in order to for EU to change certain policies and actions. So. And it's will be, of course, for European Commission to do this assessment whether we are really dealing with economic coercion here, or we are dealing with a trade conflict, and in this case, the
EU might not be as powerless when fighting against the US as you might think. While the bloc is trying to strike a deal with the US, it has a secret weapon that could be used to retaliate against Trump's tariffs. This is called the Anti-Coercion Instrument ACI, and if this is enacted, it could lead to an even more intense trade war. This tool could completely discourage US-based companies within Europe. President von der Leyen has stated that the EU does not want to retaliate, but if they do, they have a strong plan in place and would use it. The plan could involve the ACI, which would allow the bloc to impose market limitations on service companies that use American tech or Wall Street. The ACI was created in 2023 as the EU's ultimate instrument against other countries to retaliate when there are import or export restrictions or limitations on the European market. The EU has never actually used it before, but Trump could push them to the limit. European officials call it the big bazooka and think that the EU can use this as a deterrent when negotiating with the US. But others are worried that it would escalate the trade war and impact consumers even more. Still, it seems like the EU has already hinted at this, as the president of the European Commission has said that they have the strength to negotiate, and all instruments are on the table. World leaders criticize Trump.
Australian PM Anthony Albanese warned that US consumers would suffer the most from higher costs. He reiterated that imposing reciprocal tariffs would not be in Australia's best interest, as it would lead to higher prices and slower growth.
The unilateral action that the Trump administration has taken today against every nation in the world does not come as a surprise. For Australia, these tariffs are not unexpected, but let me be clear, they are totally unwarranted.
Countries around the world are worried about Trump's decision to impose new tariffs on all goods entering the U.S. The European Commission president has already called this a major blow to the world economy. The EU's stance is the same with many other countries which are worried about these tariffs, going as high as 60% for some countries. While some EU states have been supporting the economic bloc in starting a trade war, some others are worried about how it would affect them. Hungary has blamed the EU for the tariffs, asking them to get their act together and lower their tariffs on the U.S. automotive industry and negotiate. They have warned that if this continues, it would be a blow to the European community. As for Ukraine, it would negotiate with the U.S. to secure better terms, adding that it has better things to offer. China, which is the most affected by these tariffs, has also vowed to counter Trump's tariffs as the global trade war escalates. China has called Trump's new tariffs bullying. Other countries like Australia, Japan, India, and more have announced their plans to retaliate, and this can lead to a major global economic conflict. What it means for Europe's economies.
They will have a devastating impact on European exports to the United States. So they will dampen revenues, market shares, and that will have a ripple effect also on all of the supply base in Europe. So it impacts Germany, German manufacturers, but all of the European auto industry at large.
Trump's new tariffs would badly affect many EU sectors, especially in luxury goods, automotives, and German products. Luxury products are badly affected because they are usually manufactured in Europe and then exported to the U.S. Since Trump's new tariffs were announced, it caused the stocks of many EU luxury brand shares to drop. Europe's Stoxx Luxury 10 Index was 4.8% lower, while Burberry shares were over 8%. LVMH shed 4.8%, and Gucci was 5% lower. The U.S. is also a major destination for food and beverage products made in the EU, like wine, beer, spirits, chocolate, cheese, and olive oil. Many food companies saw their stocks drop, like AB InBev, the world's largest brewer, declining by 0.6% after Trump's announcement. Pernod Ricard and Heineken also dropped by 2.5% and 1.3%. Germany is especially worried about Trump's new tariffs, especially since it was the EU's largest exporter of goods in 2024. Its region has the biggest car makers, including BMW, Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and Porsche. All of these are now subject to Trump's 25% import tariffs. The EU is hitting back against Trump's latest tariffs, trying to hit the U.S. where it hurts the most. Now, Trump can't believe how much his trade war is escalating. How would he respond to the EU's latest retaliatory tariffs? Let's know what you think in the comments.